Have you ever felt as if you were operating in a world that's built for a different kind of brain? Or have you watched perhaps someone struggle to fit into a mold that just wasn't designed for them? Have you ever wondered how embracing neurodiversity could unlock hidden potential in your workplace? And are you curious about the untapped strengths neurodiverse people can bring to the table? Do you want to create an inclusive workplace environment for neurodiverse employees, challenge stereotypes, and champion neurodiversity in your organization? Join me after the intro for a conversation with a very special friend with whom we will answer this and many more questions. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's start. Hi, I'm Rossana D, and this is Forgive and Thrive, a podcast where we explore what thriving in life means and how we can achieve it, irrespective of our past, current condition, and expectations that those around us or society in general may have. Let's go. Welcome to the Forgive and Thrive show. In today's rapidly evolving workplaces, diversity and inclusion have become more than just buzzwords. They are critical components of success. But while strides have been made in promoting gender, racial, and cultural diversity, there is one aspect of diversity that often goes overlooked: neurodiversity. It might be that the first part of the word neuro is frightening, or that some of the conditions that fall under its umbrella have been seen for years as impacting on one's ability to be, quote unquote, normal, relegating those dealing with them at the outskirts of society, or simply because we don't take enough time and care to understand. Whatever the reason, as a society, we are still quite far from talking about neuro-inclusion. But why does neurodiversity matter in the first place? Well, we will be asking this question to our guests in a moment and get a more detailed answer. But for now, let's say that studies have shown that neurodiverse teams are more creative, better at problem solving, and can outperform homogeneous groups in certain tasks. However, despite these clear benefits, there is still much work to be done. Many workplaces lack the understanding, resources, and support systems needed to accommodate neurodiverse employees effectively. So today we want to dive headfirst in neurodiversity and understand how we can fill the gap in our understanding so we can all work together towards a more inclusive environment and society. And we dive into this crucially important topic in a conversation with today's guest, Tamzin Hall. Tamzin is the founder of the Neurodiversity Academy, and she's committed to empowering individuals to embrace their unique selves. With over 25 years of leadership experience, she is a shining example of resilience and success. Not only is she an accomplished author and certified performance psychology coach, she is also a pioneer advocate for neurodiversity. As a dyslexic individual, Tamzin understands the challenges and triumphs of navigating the world with a distinct neurocognitive profile. Yet she goes well beyond personal achievement, inspiring others to embrace their diversity and unlock their full potential. And through her academy, she equips individuals with the tools and support to thrive in a workplace that often overlooks their strengths. Her impact extends far beyond their own achievements as she continues to pave the way for a more inclusive society. And what a beautiful mission that is. Hi, Tamzin. Welcome to the Forgive and Thrive show. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited as well because this is a topic that is very close to my heart. It's becoming very close to my heart. I have a little disclaimer. I'm not aware I have a specific neurodiversity within the umbrella of it, but I'm a neurotype, let's put this way. And I quite dislike, let's put this way, all the talking that we are having in the workplace regarding diversity, because I would argue that diversity has 8 billion shades and that we are all diverse. So I prefer to talk about inclusion and what we can do to make as I just said about you and your mission, a more compassionate and inclusive society overall. So I'm really excited to have you here and to talk about this topic, and to bring a little bit more understanding. But before we go into that, I would like to start with you, and in particular, your journey to become a champion for neurodiversity. I mentioned that you might have some challenges on that front, but how did you become not just a champion for yourself, but also for others?
Yeah, it's I've lived with dyslexia all my life. I grew up in the 80s and 90s at school being told that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't focused enough, that I wasn't trying hard enough, that I'd never equate to anything, that I'd never be anything, had all of those really negative things that people seem to think is okay to say to children. Um, and it was really hard for me at school. I struggled. I struggled silently. My mum was my absolute champion because she knew she worked in education. In fact, both my parents worked in education, and they had this belief that I did have dyslexia. And if it wasn't for my mum fighting for me, I got a diagnosis. I think I was about 14, 15, so quite late in terms of schooling. And I got my diagnosis, and nothing really changed. I was still, made out to feel that I was not good enough. And I left school about 2 months before taking my A levels. So I didn't take my exams. I left and I went into the workplace thinking the workplace would be different and I would find money, I'd find a purpose, and I would have a successful career. And I had an amazing career, a great career, but I was trying to fit into a neurotypical world. And I was trying to conform to what society says employees should be. And the struggles that I had at school didn't go away. And I was very quickly promoted to a leadership role. And I was then struggling as a dyslexic. I have also recently self-diagnosed as ADHD, but I'll come on to that. And I was struggling in the workplace to do all things that neurotypical people do. And from my spelling to my grammar to my sense of directions to my memory, it was a real struggle. And I just plastered over it, just pretended that everything was fine. And I can remember one day I was taking some really high value clients out for lunch, and we're walking along and somebody said, "Oh, I'm just going to catch you up. Can you give me directions to where we're going?" And in that moment, I froze because I don't know my left and my right. There's something in my brain that stops me from knowing my left and my right. And I froze because I thought, I'm going to look really stupid if I start giving you directions and I get my left and my rights wrong. I've got a really great habit of kind of saying, you need to turn right, and I move my left hand. Or I say to my husband when he's driving, he says, what way do you need to go? And I say, you need to go left, and I move my right hand. I thought I'm going to look really stupid if I turn around to you and I say you need to go one way, and I move another hand, and I froze. And that was a really pivotal moment for me where I'm really trying to be someone else. And so then for the next 13 years, I then talked about in my leadership and my business, and I did my psychology degree, and kind of everything that I did, I talked about helping people to be their unique selves. Helping people, it's so important that we're our unique selves, that we're shining our own light, that we're true. And I asked myself, it was about 4 years ago, and I asked myself, how true to yourself are you actually being? Because you're hiding behind Grammarly, you're hiding behind spell check, you're hiding behind Google Maps or Waze, and my son is dyslexic as well, and I was starting to champion him, and I thought to myself, in 2020, I should not be having to champion a child with dyslexia. We need to have got this right. And then that kind of opened my eyes a bit into the workplace and how I was managing people who clearly had a neurodiversity and were just masking and trying to fit in and trying to be someone they're not. And it broke my heart. And I thought, I've got to do something. There's not enough people doing something about this. We've got to change how workplaces are dealing with, handling, supporting, because it's not okay. It is not okay. And I see some really heartbreaking examples of how it isn't okay and we haven't got it right. And we haven't even got it right in education, let's be honest. But we need to do more. And it's really the negative impact on people. I was okay. I'm confident. I had a great career. I believed in myself. I've got the most amazing husband, supportive family, and I've been given the support and the belief to get to where I am. But there's people out there who don't have that. And it's if they don't have it at home and they haven't had it at school and they don't get it at work, they're not getting it. And so they then don't believe in themselves and they don't have the confidence and they are in this negative spiral. And that's heartbreaking.
It is. And I always say that people behave in a way not because necessarily they are bad, but because they don't know any better.
Yes.
And I would argue that when it comes to neurodiversity, perhaps that is very much the case. We are probably frightened, as I mentioned in the introduction, by that first few letters, neuro, and that may sound scary. We probably carry a lot of stigma wherever our thoughts go to something that has to do with our mind. So, do you mind defining what neurodiversity is and what is included? Because neurodiversity is a kind of umbrella word, and there are many challenges, different challenges that people can face that are within that, and different challenges require different type of support and different type of understanding, I would argue.
100%. I think actually you've touched on a really, and I'll come back to those questions. I've written them down because my dyslexic brain will completely forget what you've asked. Just going back to your point there around being frightened to have that conversation. What I'm hearing now is, especially because you go online and people say, oh, you can't introduce neurodiversity like this. I'm not somebody with dyslexia, I'm dyslexic. You can't mention this, you can't do that. And what's happening by society saying, oh, you can't go there, it's stopping people from going there. It's stopping people from saying, and it's stopping leaders from saying, I don't actually understand, tell me. And I think it's something we need to change, because when we make the word neurodiversity, when we make it somewhere that people don't want to go to, a conversation they don't want to have because they're scared, it's going to alienate. It's going to stop us from having these conversations. And I'm a true believer that anything can be sorted if we have awareness and we communicate. And if we're saying to leaders, oh, you can't ask somebody if they're dyslexic, you can't actually say, do you have autism? We need to find another way of saying it, but we still need to be having those conversations. Because when we don't have those conversations and we kind of hide away and we, retreat and put the covers over and say, yeah, I'm not going there, it just has such a detrimental impact. And this is nobody's fault. This is nobody's fault. If you don't have a neurodiversity and neurodiversity isn't in your world, it hasn't crossed your path, and that's okay. And I also feel like we have the individuals who have severe traits of neurodiversity who can't function without support. We have that level. And then we have the level of neurodiversity where the individuals can go through the education system, can go to university, can get a job, and they're almost not noticed because they're their neurodiversity isn't showing up bad enough, so they're not noticed as being neurodivergent, not noticed as needing support. And almost when we leave education, it's like, well, you don't need it anymore. You haven't got neurodiversity. We don't need to help you, which isn't the case, of course. So what is neurodiversity? It is, in simple terms, it's something in our brain that's just slightly different. It just makes us behave differently, forget things, remember things, spell things differently, and it just affects our brain. It isn't anything that's bad. It isn't anything that's, particularly amazing. It just is. And it can lead to fabulous things. It can lead to fabulous careers. If we look at, I think it's 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. It's amazing. But it can also feel so hard and so challenging and so alienating. Does that answer your question?
It does. And in fact, it reminds me of something that I read about neurodiversity. It was a definition that I really liked, and it really pointed on the fact that our brain learns in different ways. We are all different from that perspective. And that's why I think perhaps going back to what you said on the word matters, neurodiversity can feel so overwhelming. So in your experience, what neurodiversity can bring as positive in the workplace? There are many conditions that can be under this umbrella, and some of them are very different. You mentioned dyslexia. There is ADHD as well, autism, OCD. So there are all different kinds of conditions that can be all grouped under neurodiversity, but they are very different from one another. So is it possible to have some sort of guideline? So the good aspect that a particular condition can bring and that is completely overlooked?
Yeah. So it's if we before we go into that, this is such a new field. So in terms of where we're at with neurodiversity, if we look at the mid-90s, it was seen as something with the stigma, really bad, naughty behavior. 21st century is when we started to recognize actually this isn't something that's intentional. This is something that's kind of, exactly as you say, brains are different. We started to understand the difference between everybody's brain and started to have conditions like autism, ADHD brought into society and ways of thinking. And there is so much more to be done. There is so much more research. So, for example, at the moment, we've got ADHD, that's something that's being explored, which is autism and ADHD together. So it's such a new field. It's ever evolving. And we have, at the moment, we have things like, we say, ADHD, which is kind of that attention span, hyperactivity, impulsive behavior. We have dyslexia, which covers kind of reading, spelling, writing, just not knowing left and right, not knowing, I'm always bumping into things and I'm always so clumsy. Then we have autism, which is that social interaction, communication, repetitive behaviors, dyspraxia, which is physical coordination, movements. We have Tourette, which is also known as tics, short-term memory, and then things like bipolar, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia is also under there. OCD you mentioned. So much is under that neurodiversity banner. You have all these different neurodiversities, all these different people under each neurodiversity. Somebody with ADHD is going to be very, very different to somebody else with ADHD. It's so much, it's so vast that, coming back to your point around, are we putting it into these too small boxes, when actually, and everything that I talk about is we need to really figure out what's going on for the individual, because we are all so different. We need so many different things. Treating somebody with a cold and somebody else with a cold exactly the same isn't going to work. There has to be this real understanding and support of everybody to really get this right, is my true belief.
I absolutely love that. And I totally agree with you saying, I don't like to be put in a box. I'm a much more complex human being than you can just represent me with one word. So do you think that perhaps the already putting everything under that umbrella of neurodiversity is already the problem? So we are trying to solve a problem where already the word that we use to put everything under the same spotlight perhaps create confusion, challenges that then become too perhaps overwhelming?
It's so difficult to answer because I have some clients who want that. They want that diagnosis. They need that. They need that. They need that understanding. It means so much to them. And some people want to almost be, not necessarily put in a box, but have the reason why they are the way they are. And then there's some people that really don't. And it's because it's so broad and because it's so open to internal interpretation and so different for everybody, it's really difficult to answer. As I said, I have a dyslexia diagnosis. I have self-diagnosed ADHD. I'm never going to go any further with that because I'm a Tamzin-shaped me. I'm very different to anybody else. I always have been, and I always will be. And that's okay. And I needed to have that dyslexia diagnosis. I don't feel I need to have an ADHD diagnosis, but some of my clients absolutely have to have it. And I think we need to be more, as society, as workplaces, education, we need to be more open to saying, if that's what you want, you can have that. If you need to have a diagnosis, we'll give you a diagnosis. If you don't need to have a diagnosis, we're not going to treat you any differently. If we look at and this is in the UK, but neurodiversity is classed as a disability. So according to the Equality Act 2010, if someone has a physical or mental condition that seriously impacts their ability to do things for a long time, so for about 12 months or more, they are considered to have a disability, regardless of whether they have a diagnosis or not. They don't have to have a diagnosis. If something's impacting us, that's classed as a disability. So employers have to get this right. They have to support regardless of having a disability or not. And I absolutely love this. I'm such an advocate for this because if somebody wants that, amazing, let's give it to them. If they don't want it, why should we treat them differently? I don't think we should. And I'm really pleased that the Equality Act says we're not going to treat people differently. We're going to, this is here for everybody.
One aspect when think about workplace environments, there are conditions that may be challenging that ability to perform certain tasks or be as productive as an employer would expect. Where is the limit between one person saying, I have this problem, this issue, and the organization coming, do you have any problem that I need to be aware of?
Yeah.
In a very inclusive society, in a very compassionate society, this is something that personally I would like to see, where we are free and we feel that we can be open and vulnerable and we can disclose what is happening to us for the benefit of us, obviously, and our employer. But then you mentioned also before the stigma, and there are lots of misconceptions, perhaps, that we still carry and stereotypes that we carry about this condition. So where is that good mid spot where we can really make sure that whoever is in front of us, for example, during an interview, has a fair chance to get a job and to thrive in the job, because we don't go in a job just to do something. We need to thrive, and we thrive by doing that job. I hope it is clear.
Yeah. It's very clear. Yeah. We haven't got this right as a country in this world. We have not got it right at the moment, and I think it's only by awareness and by people like you and me that are flying that flag to raise awareness. Because I still see now people going to a job interview and not being selected because of their neurodiversity. And that to me is, well, it's against the law, but it isn't okay. But the reason why it's happening, and I'm not justifying it by any stretch of the imagination, the reason it's happening is because the interviewer doesn't understand. They don't have that awareness. They just see, they probably go back to when they were at school and they saw the autistic child or the dyslexic child who was being disruptive and was being made to feel they were a nuisance, and the rest of the class saw them as a bit of a nuisance. And it's wrong on every level. There's still some countries in the world who, if you have an autism diagnosis, you can't go and live there. There's still courts in the country that do not give and grant custody to parents with autism. And it's not okay. And I think because of all of this, and because of the stigma, and because of especially people who are later on in life, I'm seeing people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s who experience so much negativity towards them, bullying, exclusion, horrendous words, things said to them, just the most awful things that no human being deserves. They're carrying that, and they feel they are unable to share, and they are masking because they don't want people to know, because they cannot go back to that place of feeling the way that they've been made to feel in the past. And so there's a huge job to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. And how do we create a really inclusive environment when we're in front of people who are so traumatized by what's happened in their past? They don't want to share with anybody. How do we create that inclusive environment? And some companies have this absolutely amazing, and it starts with awareness. It starts with understanding. It starts with having a conversation with everybody, having neurodiversity as something that is this golden thread that's weaved through everything. We have support groups, neurodiversity support groups that anybody can go to. We have inclusive practices, so interview questions are sent out beforehand. Any meeting agendas are sent out beforehand. We have a very inclusive environment where we have things on screens, things written out. So we're catering for auditory so people can hear. We've got transcriptions on. We're allowing people to see that we cater for everybody. And when we show, we don't just talk. This is not just a tick box exercise. That tick box is worth nothing if we don't weave it through everything we do. So it's having those open conversations. It's showing everybody that you are inclusive and you mean it, and that you understand. If somebody needs noise cancelling headsets, they get noise cancelling headsets. If someone needs dictation software, they get dictation software. If somebody needs a quiet room because they can't deal with that hustle and bustle, they get that. And by showing and by being and by having neurodiversity as something that we're all proud of, and this could be as simple as the CEO or the senior leadership team saying, do you know what, I'm here and I'm dyslexic and I'm proud of it. And if I do a presentation, my PowerPoint presentation or whatever it is I'm putting up has been through every single checkpoint it can. It's been through Grammarly, it's been through spell check. I've had it through read aloud, so I've listened to it. I've given it to my parents to double check because teachers, they're brilliant at double checking everything. And then I've put it through Grammarly again. So there's probably 5 or 6 different points to check it's right, but guaranteed every single time I've got spelling or grammar mistakes on my presentation. And years ago, I'd be mortified. But now I say that with a caveat. You know, I'm here, I've got dyslexia. The fact that I can't spell and my grammar isn't great doesn't make me any less capable of what I'm here to talk to you about. And showing that it's okay to not be perfect, showing that I had a CEO. He did it, and it was amazing that he did it. But he was, you know, do I share this vulnerability? But he was talking at an event and he had to read something out. And normally he would just say, give it to someone else to read out because he can't read it. And it was with his staff and with his people. And he said, you know, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it with a caveat, just like you do, Tamzin. And I'm going to say, I'm not great at reading out loud because I have dyslexia. He then read it out. And there was some words that he kind of, you know, struggled with, but he got there. And he had the number of people that came up to him afterwards and said, wow, you have shown me it's okay. And I have more respect for you than I've ever had. That's showing that we are an inclusive and we don't care. We're here to support. It's actions, not just words.
There are so many points that really caught my attention here. I loved the fact that you started with awareness. Very often we think, oh, you know, if we want to improve the diversity in our organization, then we need to recruit more diverse people. But then who is going to do the recruiting? People that don't have the sensitivity, don't have the understanding. And so it seems starting too down the line, if you know what I mean. So I like that. I like the fact that we need to change the environment, even when the diversity is not as pronounced as we would like to. I like that you mentioned there are tools. There are lots of tools nowadays that are coming on the market and that can really help and facilitate people with different abilities. And I think as organizations move forward in time, they really need to embrace these new technologies. But you also mentioned hiring processes. So you already identified a few things that we can change there. If you had to go and further and just give 1 or 2 advices to whoever is recruiting right now, what can they do to make that process more inclusive?
I would say that you need to understand, and it comes back to awareness, you need to understand how amazing the neurodivergent community is and how much they will bring to your organization and how much they will take it from where it is to where you want it to be. Phenomenal people are neurodiverse, and you can't ask, this is one thing you can't do. You can't ask in an interview, are you autistic? Are you ADHD? Are you dyslexic? You can't ask that. And I would say something you touched on earlier is something that I'm a big advocate for is everything I do is not about alienating anybody. This isn't about saying we just need to focus on the neurodivergent individuals and forget the neurotypical. This is about making it inclusive for everybody because there'll be some neurotypical people who don't even know they have a neurodiversity. We want to include everybody. We don't ever want anybody to feel not good enough and excluded. So my biggest piece of advice is don't get caught up in what neurodiversity they might have. If they don't make eye contact with you, it isn't because they're being rude. If they take a bit of time to answer the question, it isn't because they don't know how to. If they ask for things in writing beforehand, it isn't because they want an advantage over anybody. If they ask for a break halfway through, that's okay. Be a little bit curious as to If I let go of any expectation, what might happen? If I am trying to fill the role of somebody who's been promoted and they were amazing at their job, let go of who they were and how they presented. Let go of that. And just look at this person that's in front of you and any behaviors that you think, I don't like that behavior, don't understand that. Ask yourself why. Be inclusive. So always, always, always give the interview questions beforehand to everybody, because an autistic brain has to have the questions beforehand. If they don't, and if they're put on the spot, it's a bit like a fish out of water. They don't know how to breathe. They're in that stressed state. They are probably in freeze, maybe fight. They just don't know what to do. So give everybody the questions beforehand. Don't see it as they're going to really prepare for this. They're going to prepare for it anyway. But we're just making it more of a pleasant experience. So I don't know if you heard, and this is in the UK, but the NHS back end of last year was taken to a tribunal because they did not provide reasonable adjustments for an interview candidate. And the reasonable adjustments, as far as I'm aware, were that the interview candidate asked for the interview questions beforehand. So they didn't provide them. They were taken to a tribunal and the interview candidate won. So they got, I think, about £20,000. And it's so easily avoided. Give everybody the interview questions. I can remember going to an interview in a bar, and for somebody who is autistic or ADHD, with all of that background noise and everything that's going on, that's not okay. That's not where you do an interview. You don't go to a bar. And so just thinking, what does everybody need? Everybody needs to feel welcome. Give them a drink, give them a tea, coffee, glass of water. If it's going to be a long interview, make sure you have breaks. Give them a break, ideally every 45 minutes. Factor that in. Give them a pen and paper. Give them time to reflect and give the interview questions beforehand, and have that interview in a really quiet place as well.
That's so important. Tamzin, can we give some example of some of the strengths that some of the conditions may have? I don't know if it's clear, because as you mentioned before, we tend to think of neurodiversity as a disability. And I would like to reframe that into the concept of different ability. And when we think in terms of different ability, then we can be open to the possibility that there might be a strength in the way that brain works and the way that brain learns.
Absolutely. I'd love to give you some. Now, there are hundreds, okay? There are hundreds. And when I work with my clients, I always make sure that we identify a whole load of strengths that are really unique to them. So I'll give you a couple of strengths, but if you do have a neurodiversity, or you have somebody in your world who has a neurodiversity, they have so many strengths. They bring so much to the table. So let's look at ADHD to start with. ADHD brains have this most amazing ability to multitask and hyperfocus as well. They can be really, really, really focused on something. Their creativity is sky high, through the roof. They are super energetic. They have all the energy in the world. I should have said something beforehand as a bit of a caveat. With regards to any neurodiversity, you can Google ADHD traits. How do I know I've got ADHD? Well, all the symptoms that I have. You'll be given a whole list of things. You don't have to have all of them to be neurodivergent. These strengths are quite general, they're not specific. And ADHDers are so empathetic. They are fabulous. They've got so much to bring. About 5% of the population is ADHD. And with dyslexia, we've got about 10% of the population who is dyslexic. So dyslexic strengths are visual thinking. They're very, very visual thinkers. They are intuitive, really, really intuitive, and they've got really big people skills, huge people skills, and big picture thinkers. So then autism. So with autism, about 2% of the population is autistic, and about 50% of individuals who have ADHD may also have autism, which is where the AUDHD has come in because it's a blend of autism and ADHD. So autism strengths, they have the most amazing memory. Oh my gosh. As a dyslexic, I am so jealous of their memory. Amazing memory. Very, very focused, very good attention to detail, amazing attention to detail. And they're very honest. Because they're honest and they have a high level of integrity, they believe everybody else is honest, which can be, so many strengths, so many strengths.
I think that really helps. And, if we think in terms of what the strengths are, we can definitely see that there is a space, there is a place for them in any organization, rather than say, oh, you have this problem. And that, I think, will help with the whole discussion about neuro-inclusion, as we said before. How can we measure the effectiveness of initiatives that go in the neuro-inclusion direction, apart from obviously the headcount? There is one aspect that you mentioned earlier, and that is when the CEO comes and says, I have dyslexia, I have this and I have that. And that is a very important aspect, because it's not just including at the lower level of the organigram, it's including that particular neurotype everywhere, and give that opportunity to whoever go up in that organigram and become perhaps one day CEO, isn't it? That's the real inclusion, when we can benefit from these strengths at all levels, and not just at the bottom of the scale.
Absolutely. I think it's all around that awareness piece, and it can be gauged by the number of people that are saying, I want to attend your neurodiversity support group, or I want to take up the neurodiversity coaching that you offer, or that Dragon software, or sorry, the Dragon software is a dictation software, but that software, I want that. And the more of those requests coming in, because 20% of the population is neurodivergent, and that is diagnosed cases. It's so many more of undiagnosed or self-diagnosed. And so if we're just having those conversations and we're hearing, that's great. That's great, having those conversations.
And looking into the future, what kind of changes or advancements do you hope to see in how we embrace neurodiversity and we support neurodiverse people in the workplace?
We have to get this right. We really do. It's leading to so many negative mental health conditions. It leads to anxiety, depression, low self-doubt, low confidence. It's frightening how, if we get this wrong, what happens. And so we have to get it right. Businesses, society, we have to. And my hope is that as research and as science evolves in this field, that we will start to understand it better. My concern is, especially in the UK, we are finding it so difficult to get support, because everyone's stretched, aren't they? Let's be honest, everybody is stretched. And so it does concern me that we have lots of stigma still around it. It concerns me that we are pointing fingers and saying we can't talk about it in this way, you can't introduce it in this way, you can't have a conversation like this, that concerns me because it's putting people off having those conversations. And I still think society has so far to go. Research and science certainly is a good start, and having people that are talking about it and flying that flag is a really good start. But I still see people are flying a flag about neurodiversity in people's personal lives. It doesn't switch off when we go into work. So there's that flag as well to be flown there. So I really, really hope we can get this right. And everything I do is in positive psychology, so I'm positive. I do believe we can get this right. I think it's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of people wanting to get this right. But I think we can do it. And I'm certainly on my mission to get that awareness out there and talk to as many people I can about it.
Talking about the future, I would like to ask you what's in the pipeline for you? What are you working on and planning for the rest of the year?
So I am launching my Neurodiversity for Leaders course. So that starts on the 1st of June. So that is a comprehensive program where I give leaders all of my knowledge, everything that I know about neurodiversity. I share it all. We have weekly calls, we have coaching sessions, we have SOS calls. I give them all of my tools and techniques and everything so that they can effectively manage and support their staff. So that's in the pipeline. I'm just about to launch my own neurodiversity support group where people can come, employees can come along and just talk about neurodiversity. And I am partnering with some amazing companies and some amazing training companies just to get that awareness and to do more awareness training and to take neurodiversity in to as many businesses as I can. And I'm on a mission to get into as many businesses. I have said, I would like to say kind of 1 million businesses in the next 5 years. Whether that's possible or not, I'd like to think I can get into as many businesses as I can, growing my business so that there's more of me to be able to go out and wave that flag as well, and just have those conversations and just build that awareness, because people deserve it, employers deserve it, employees deserve it, and it's it's actually very, very easy once you know how. And I really don't want it to have this stigma that it has. I want it to be something that's great. You're here, you're neurodivergent. That's amazing. Come on in. I can support you. That's what I want it to be.
Wow, that is a fantastic, beautiful mission. So if our listeners would like to know more about what you do and where they can find you.
I am the neurodiversityacademy.com. I'm Tamzin Hall on LinkedIn. I'm Tamzin Hall on Instagram. And they can, oh, one thing I didn't mention. Can I mention it?
Of course.
So I have written a book. I've co-authored a book. And as somebody who is dyslexic, and I'm hoping this is going to help people that might be listening to this who have a neurodiversity. So obviously I said at the beginning that I have, at school I was told I wouldn't become anything. My English was appalling because I couldn't spell, and I was told all of those negative things. And I've written a book. And so I co-authored a book, and I've written a chapter in this book, and it got to #1, Amazon #1 bestseller. And I graduated a couple of years ago, got to #1 bestseller. Like, anything's possible. Anything is possible. And when you have the right support and you have people around you that believe in you, you can do anything, absolutely anything. So if anyone's listening to this thinking, I've got so much in me and I don't know what to do because I feel like I've either been held back or I'm holding myself back, you can do anything that you want to do, because I have, and I'm proof that you can.
Absolutely. And with this inspiring message, I would like to ask you the very final question. In fact, if there was one take-home message that you would love everybody to remember from this conversation, what that would be?
That regardless of what the person in front of you or what you are showing, so regardless of what's happening, we have so much potential. And if you're seeing something that somebody is constantly turning up late, or they are interrupting you when you're talking, or their work is just, you can't understand it because of so many spelling mistakes, they're not doing it deliberately. They are trying their best. And just build that awareness. Just ask them, is everything okay? Can I help? I've noticed this. Is there anything you want to share? Can I help you? And if you're somebody who keeps making those mistakes and you've got somebody that says to you, is everything okay? Just see what would happen if you trusted them a bit. Because the person that's in front of you isn't that kid at school that bullied you.
That's beautiful. Well, as we draw this episode to a close, it's clear to me that the conversation around neurodiversity in the workplace, and I would argue in society in general, is not just important, it's imperative. The road to true neurodiversity and neuro-inclusion is ongoing, requiring continuous education, advocacy, and action. It's about challenging the status quo, dismantling stereotypes, and championing the value of diverse minds. It's about creating environments where every individual, regardless of their neurology, feels valued, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential. And with this in mind, I want to leave you with a beautiful, inspiring quote from Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "Our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization." Tamzin, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for sharing so much about yourself and what you do. I really love your mission, and I really hope that one day perhaps we can join forces together and talk about this topic once more, and the situation will be completely different, and we will have neuro-inclusion without any problem.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fabulous to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we would love to know what you think about this topic. Are you or someone you know dealing with a neurodiverse condition? If so, I'm sure today's conversation comes as beneficial. But if you're facing challenges that perhaps we didn't discuss today, then check out Tamzin's website, her work, and social media. You will find all the answers and support that you need right there. All the links, as always, will be in the description of today's episode. Hopefully not, but if you have been affected in any way by the topic we discussed today, as always, I invite you to seek professional help. Join me next time when we will continue exploring inspiring and challenging situations, because remember, we are together in this journey. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell and like this video. See you in the next one.